In this video, we're going to travel back in time through the story of the Mesopotamian hero who struggled to understand his mortality, longing to understand the nature of the gods, and traveled across the great ocean to meet the man who survived the flood. Hello, if you're new to my channel, welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. Also, I'd like to send a warm greeting to all my subscribers. Welcome back to my eclectic space. Come, watch your step. We're about to set the dial on our time machine to circa 2600 BCE. I heard a few scribes just finished making a few cuneiform tablets. So that's right off the press. Don't worry if you can't read ancient Sumerian. I managed to pull British Assyriologist Andrew George away from his current project just for a bit. I am sure his students at the University of London won't mind his absence. He is known best for his translation of the tablets we're about to look at. Without him, these would be just a bunch of sticks and lines of which I could not make any sense. The tablets are the Epic of Gilgamesh, known as the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet. It is one of the world's oldest surviving poetry work of literature and considered one of the oldest religious texts written in Sumerian. It reveals in its corpus a diverse of literary aspects from which I am not an expert, to include narrative poetry, praise poetry, hymns, laments, prayers, songs, fables, debate poetry, and proverbs. The majority of this has been reconstructed during the past few years or so from thousands of fragmentary clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform writing. The dating of the Epic of Gilgamesh is somewhat difficult to ascertain, partly because it is a work composed from multiple sources and tablets across centuries, and there were so many fragments discovered by different people at different times, and yet more fragments are still resting under the earth, and who knows if and when we'll have a complete literary work. So bear with me as I bring you Andrew George's translation in its current state. If you'd like to jump to the poem, please go to the description of this video and you will find a jump link that will take you right there. Otherwise, let me share some of my findings and observations. It will add a whole new richness to these ancient words. The earliest copies of the tablets known are Sumerian. They date to the Old Babylonian period, 2000 to 1600 BC. Scholars say that the Ebla tablets have some Gilgamesh content, and that would move the date back circa 2600 BCE. So depending where the fragments of the Gilgamesh tablets were located, the scholars make such references. For nearly 200 years, hardly anything was known about the Epic of Gilgamesh, except for some reference in a book titled De Natura Animalium, chapter 12, by the 2nd century AD Roman writer Aelian. But everything changed when an Englishman named Austin Henry Layard made the discovery of the first tablet. The first tablets were found late in 1849 in the royal palace of Sennacherib, whose reign was from 705 to 681 BC. Then, 3 years later, in 1852, Hormuzd Razam and W.K. Loftus, colleagues of Layard, found another library of an additional 10,000 tablets on the opposite side of the site at the palace of Ashurbanipal, whose reign was from 668 through 627 BC. Uruk was a real city, which today is known as Warka. British archaeologist William Loftus made its discovery in 1849 and first excavated in 1850 through 1854. The city was one of the largest in the Sumerian and Babylonian eras, with an area of over 2.3 square miles. Not quite big for a city, considering I used to be a mayor for our city that is approximately 4.6 square miles in Lake Helen, Florida. I've always thought it was more of a village. City or village, people have their needs, and it is said that one of the distinguishing archaeological features was the large surrounding wall whose construction was attributed to Gilgamesh, and it is mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh. I would like to preface that I am no scholar and depend on external sources for information, so I have provided my research links in the description of this video. My interest in this content is to have a peek at the culture, the landscape, the politics, the roots of religious cult. How did these come about? The beliefs of the people of that time, and also the honor of accessing these translated texts and sharing them with you. I believe that history books are not the only source of history. Much can be garnered from poems, songs, hymns, and stories, which, who knows, for whatever reason, may not be included in the more scholarly texts. And what a shame indeed to you and me. I learned that for the longest time the history of mankind was being passed down from one generation to the next orally, be it through storytelling or bards, and also through art, such as paintings and sculptures. It is said that the earliest written texts came from the Sumerians as early as 3400 BC. Now, Gilgamesh is thought by scholars to have been an historical figure, king of the Sumerian city-state of Uruk during the 27th century BCE. So there is more to this poem. He is mentioned in the Sumerian king list, which is an ancient stone tablet that provides a chronicle of the kings of Sumer through about 1700 BCE. His place in the list occupies, we're told, an interesting point of transition from the legendary to the historical. Before Gilgamesh, every king is recorded as reigning for over 100 years. Some of them, tens of thousands of years, mind-boggling for people of our time. Yet, they note that after Gilgamesh, dynasties lasted for 3 to 36 years, and this portion of the list, according to scholars, has been proven to be historically accurate. Gilgamesh is listed as having ruled for 126 years. Now, it is said that Uruk was a major city with 50,000 to 80,000 residents at its height around 2900 BCE. Now, that's a lot of people in a 2.3 square mile radius. It is said that the earliest texts from Uruk date to 3300 BCE. The city was located about 100 miles south of present-day Baghdad, near the Euphrates River. Some scholars say that Uruk is thought to be the city of Erech, mentioned in Genesis chapter 10, verse 10, which states, quote, "The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Erech, Akkad, in the land of Shinar," end quote. Where Erech is listed among the foundational cities established by Nimrod, who was noted as the first great ruler on earth and a mighty hunter. As we travel back in time with the ancient texts of the Epic of Gilgamesh, we can almost smell the ancient Mesopotamia air. And as we move from one word to the next, you and I are like literary archaeologists, discovering a whole culture anew. These are some of my observations that I'd like to share with you, so please keep this fresh in your mind as we step into these ancient tablets. I noticed that right in the first tablet, we're directed to Uruk the sheepfold. And I have learned that often a person, a deity, or region was called by different names, and it can be a bit confusing. Very similar, like we'll call pancakes in one part of our country here in the United States and flapjacks in another, or violins can sometimes be called fiddles. It's almost as if every culture has its own origin story that in one way or another seems to parallel each other. as if there was a race to be the first one in telling the story. Anyways, Uruk the sheepfold was just another name for the city of Uruk, because of the centrality of Ishtar's temple, where the king, acting as high priest, would reenact the lovemaking of the goddess and her human lover Tammuz, also known as Dumuzi, the shepherd. While the linguists, scholars, and theologists debate on what came first, the chicken or the egg, I like to view these ancient texts from a common sense approach, because if we don't, then they're simply words. And we may overlook that the chicken and the egg were there simultaneously from the beginning, just to throw us off. I do want to mention that Dumuzi is mentioned in Tablet 6, when Ishtar wanted Gilgamesh for herself, and he disdains her. Tammuz appears in Sumerian texts as early as 2600 BC, but his cult and following probably, they say, was much older than that. So I'm going to take this moment right now and just talk a little bit about Tammuz, which is also known as Dumuzi or Damuzu, and he was originally a Sumerian or Babylonian sun god and the husband of Ishtar, who corresponds to Aphrodite of the Greeks. The worship of these deities was introduced into Syria in very early times under the designation of Tammuz and Astarte, and appears among the Greeks in the myth of Adonis and Aphrodite, who are identified with Osiris and Isis of the Egyptian pantheon, showing how widespread the cult became. And it does not take a person long to see how many of today's religion are polished offshoots of religions and cults of a bygone era, with concepts of death and resurrection, an obsession or curse of the human race, some would say. Tammuz was known as a fertility god. He represented the insemination of the mother goddess. The best-known myth of Tammuz describes his death at the hands of his lover, a punishment earned for his failure to mourn adequately when she became lost in the underworld. So during the 2004 through 1792, which was also known as the Isin Larsa period, the texts relate that in the marriage rite, the king actually took on the identity of the god, and thus, by consummating the marriage with a priestess incarnating the goddess, magically fertilized and fecundated all of nature for the year. You'll notice that a similar ritual takes place in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Creepy stuff. And that could be some big ego or some great excuse for personal pleasures. This ritual was celebrated twice a year in fall and spring, hence death and resurrection, get it? And this was to celebrate the death of Tammuz. And there arose, in connection with this celebration, those licentious rites which were spread throughout the region, with some modification taking on new titles, in some cases called mysteries, which rendered the cult so infamous that it was suppressed by Constantine the Great, which in many cases involved drugs and minors. You can learn more about that from Dr. Hillman's YouTube channel called Lady Babylon. The only time the Bible records the name Tammuz is in Ezekiel, in chapter 8, verse 14. God was showing the prophet Ezekiel all the abominations that were going on in the temple, and women were weeping for Tammuz, also associated with Greek Adonis. It is said that the book of Ezekiel was written during Ezekiel's captivity in Babylon. He prophesied from about 592 to 570 BC. So by way of comparison, I'm just going to take this moment here to show a couple things for conversation purposes. So according to Jewish Virtual Library, Abraham, who was the first of the Jewish prophets, is believed to have lived around 1900 to 1800 BC. Moses is believed to have led his people out of Egypt between 1500 to 1200 BC, which makes the Epic of Gilgamesh a valuable written document, since the written proof appeared way before those dates. The earliest known precursor to Hebrew was an inscription in the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet, which is the Khirbet Qeiyafa inscription from the 11th to 10th century BC, which was discovered just recently in 2008. It would appear that historical figures from shortly after the flood, gathering their people and doing what seems to be a most human and natural thing to do, especially after an impacting event that nearly wiped out civilization, caused each group to gather wherever they were to survive and adapt to the circumstances and climates, and each retained or modified a version necessary to oversee and govern those that did survive. And that's just my thoughts. And so the mythologies of Sumer, the Akkadian Empire, Babylonia, Canaan, Egypt, and Greece resemble each other. If we are to question the nature of man, especially as he looks at a starry sky at night, as many of us have done, one can't help but to feel like a grain of sand looking up. And it would seem that this concept is not foreign in the minds of man in ancient times, and hence the idea of the religious and cult concepts should not be overlooked. Right in the first tablet of this epic poem, we are introduced to religious and cult concepts, with the sacred storehouse of holy Inanna, and also the wild bull of Lugalbanda. That holy Inanna is a temple. And so, mentioning the wild bull of Lugalbanda, in Mesopotamia, gods were associated with the bull, and this relationship took on many forms. It could be that the bull would serve as the god's divine animal, or the god could be likened to the bull, or he could actually take on the form of the beast. It does not surprise me how these concepts take root. Often the weak look to the strong for direction, and the one who leads often has great influence, or ruled by tyranny, and soon dictates become customs, becoming so watered down that we forget even why we partake in the watered down or commercial holidays of today. Recently, I added to our virtual library another story of creation titled The Epic of Atrahasis, and I intentionally started with that one because of a couple of observations. First, it is said to be older than the Epic of Gilgamesh. And second, many scholars state that earlier versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh did not include the story of the flood that is currently part of the epic poem found in Tablet 11. And after reading both, I did find almost word for word some parts of the Atrahasis text included in the Gilgamesh, yet my conundrum begins with two characters that appear to be the same, which is Atrahasis and the character in Gilgamesh, Upnamishtim, who tells Gilgamesh about the flood. To me, they both are the same character. The name Atrahasis also appears as a king of Shurupuk in the times before a flood in one of the Sumerian king lists, while Utnapishtim is noted as being a legendary king of Shurupak, but his name does not appear directly under the ruler column. If the poem is any reflection of who Gilgamesh was as a ruler, he was a tyrant and had a big ego. Not only did he challenge the young men of the city to fight him, especially the good-looking ones, but he deflowered every young bride before she could consummate with her betrothed. The translator, Andrew George, expands further on this point in his book in the section titled The Pennsylvania Tablet, Surpassing All Other Kings, Tablet 2, also known as Gilgamesh P, where he mentions the term droit de seigneur, a French term used to describe the purported legal right of the lord of an estate to deflower its virgin, as well as a number of other rights, including hunting, taxation, and farming. Quite interesting how Enkidu, who himself was created by the gods from clay and had no mother or father, so to speak, did not believe that the traditions of the ruling king to take a man's bride prior to consummation was proper, and challenged Gilgamesh to fight. Yet, while he may have won that battle, he conceded that Gilgamesh's kingship to be legitimate. It was the cutting word of Gilgamesh's mother, directed to Enkidu, that hurt him deeply. Yet, The poem infers that it is a law that such a thing take place. Quote, by divine consent it is so ordained, when his navel cord was cut, for him she was destined. End quote. Ah, the ways of gods and kings, which we're mere mortals must not question. At this point, I'd like to introduce the gods that appear in the first 3 tablets, and throughout, of course. Anu is the Mesopotamian sky god and a member of the triad of deities, completed by Enlil and Ea, also known as Enki. Then there's Aruru, also known as both the goddess Nintu and at other times referred to as the mother goddess Ninhursag. She was said to be the Great One who created mankind so numerous. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, she took a pinch of clay, threw it down in the wild, and created Enkidu, the hero, who was the offspring of silence, knit strong by Ninurta. Ninurta was the god of the harvest and of war. His father was Enlil, the god of air, and his mother was Ninhursag, also known as Aruru. In the Epic of Atrahasis, Nintu fashions humans out of clay mixed with the flesh, blood, and intelligence of one of the gods who sacrifices himself for the good of the many and creates humanity. Then there's Ishtar, also known as Inanna, goddess of war and sexual love. Ishtar is considered a member of the gods called the Annunakis, which were part of the Sumerian pantheon, and the name Annunaki means those who from heaven came to earth. These Sumerian gods were associated with the heavens, earth and water, and also with the creation of humans. The Annunakis are part of the Sumerian pantheon and the descendants of the sky god An, which included the 7 gods who decree, which were An, Enlil, Anki, Ninhursag, Nanna, Utu, and Inanna. In one verse, they group more of the Anunnaki gods, and they clump together Anu, Enlil, and Ea, also known as Anki. Anu was said to be the Mesopotamian sky god and supposedly king of the gods, and he completed that triad of deities along with Enlil and Anki. Enlil was the god of the atmosphere. He is sometimes known as Nunamir and was one of the most important gods in the ancient Mesopotamian pantheon. He also controlled the hurricane and the winds of spring. Some scholars say he is the child of An, and he is the brother of the goddess Aruru. Ea of the ocean, below, also known as Enki, is the Mesopotamian god of wisdom, medicine, and sea, and the ruler of the ocean and the fresh water, Abzu. There's also Shamash, was an ancient Mesopotamian sun god, also considered an Anunnaki, as the solar deity, exercised the power of light over darkness and evil, and in this capacity he became known as the god of justice and equity and was the judge of both gods and men, and as a divine judge he was associated with the underworld. Then they mention Aya. She was a Mesopotamian goddess associated with dawn. Then there is Ningishzida, was a power of the netherworld, where he held the office of throne bearer, and he seems to have been originally a tree god. He was commonly associated with snakes, and probably one of the earliest deities seen with the double snakes, like in the medical symbol of the caduceus. So did he provide knowledge of the medicinal uses and counter poisons of the snake venom? Also, I found interesting a verse mentioning the Igigi, which were referenced in the Epic of Atrahasis, and it read, quote, "Who is there would oppose him among the Igigi?" Does that mean that the Igigis were living among the humans? According to the Epic of Atrahasis, the Igigi were lesser gods tasked to do work here on earth until they got fed up. For more on that, make sure to visit my book playlist. In the meantime, I will leave a pop-up link for you to follow. It will probably show up on the top right of this video. It won't last long. Then there's Adad, also known as Ishkur, and he was a weather god of the Babylonian and Assyrian pantheon, and often referred to as son of the moon god Nana, Sin, by Ningal, and brother of Utu, Shamash, and Inanna, Ishtar. He is also sometimes described as the son of Enlil. Then they mention Humbaba. He is the protector of the forest, and it is his task, given to him by the god Enlil, to attack those who attempt to chop down any of the cedar trees. I think we need some of that around. What do you? And hence, when Gilgamesh and Enkidu slay Humbaba, it angers the gods. One could also ask, does Humbaba represent the untamed natural world, that barrier, to human advancement? Not much has changed when we see so much deforestation in the name of progress. Because she plays an important role in the beginning of this epic poem, I believe it's fitting to mention Gilgamesh's mom, who was said to be both clever and wise. Ninsun. She was a Mesopotamian goddess depicted as a cow goddess, symbolizing fertility and motherhood, hence her title, Lady of the Wild Cows or Wild Cow. And she could interpret dreams. She was wife of deified legendary king Lugalbanda, who is listed in the Sumerian king list as the second king of Uruk, who ruled for 1200 years, and providing him with the epithet of the shepherd. So the Epic of Gilgamesh revealed some interesting rites performed by Ninsun as she was charging an order to the gods. She went into the bathhouse 7 times. She bathed herself in water of tamarisk and soapwort. Now, for you who may be intrigued by this, or interested in holistic medicine, or creating an interesting mythical herb garden, I did leave some links for you on that, which that could be right up my alley. I learned that tamarisk is an interesting shrub or small evergreen tree, and due to its ability to withstand drought, the tree represents hope and life, and by that it is considered to be a sacred tree. It has a long history of being used for medicinal purposes. In ancient times, the bark and leaves of the tamarisk were used to treat fever, wounds, and digestive problems, and it was used to make a vegetable product called manna, not to be confused with the manna that the Hebrews were using with their 40 years walking through the desert. This manna, this tamarisk manna, is created when the tamarisk is boiled, strained, and that byproduct was used as like honey. Then the soapwort plant is most well known for creating a foamy lather that was gentle and it had cleansing properties. It is said that soapwort is one of the most concentrated sources of compounds called saponins in the world, which studies suggest fight bacteria, inflammation, and have astringent properties. Some records show soapwort may have been used as a washing agent for over 12,000 years, dating back to the Stone Age. It's believed that people living at this time used plants like soapwort that grew nearby streams to help wash their hands, their hair, and their skin. And well, the fact that it is stated in the Epic of Gilgamesh confirms that last statement. So back to Ninsun's detailed ritual. So not only was she a goddess, a queen, but also possibly a priestess. In her ritual, she then sets up a censer up at the roof and offers it to Shamash. And scattering the incense, she then charges Shamash to perform a task. So there was some point that we became privy to a conversation that Ninsun has with her son Gilgamesh, and after hearing his crazy idea to go off and slay Humbaba, she decides to adopt Enkidu and charges him with the responsibility of watching over Gilgamesh, so to speak. Now, my dear time traveler, I believe we are ready to step out of this time capsule and into ancient Mesopotamia. Tablet 1. The Coming of Enkidu. Prologue and Paean. King Gilgamesh tyrannizes the people of Uruk, who complain to the gods. To divert his superhuman energies, the gods create his counterpart, the wild man, Enkidu, who is brought up by the animals of the wild. Enkidu is spotted by a trapper who lures him away from the herd with a prostitute. The prostitute shows him her arts and proposes to take him to Uruk, where Gilgamesh has been seeing him in dreams. He who saw the deep, the country's foundation, who knew, was wise in all matters. Gilgamesh, who saw the deep, the country's foundation, who knew, was wise in all matters. He, everywhere, and learnt of everything the sum of wisdom. He saw what was secret, discovered what was hidden. He brought back a tale of before the deluge. He came a far road, was weary, found peace, and set all his labors on a tablet of stone. He built the rampart of Uruk the sheepfold, of holy Inanna, the sacred storehouse. See its wall like a strand of wool. View its parapet that none could copy. Take the stairway of a bygone era, draw near to Inanna, seat of Ishtar, the goddess, that no later king could ever copy. Climb Uruk's wall and walk back and forth. Survey its foundations. Examine the brickwork. Were its brick not fired in an oven? Did the 7 sages not lay its foundations? A square mile is city. A square mile date grove. A square mile is clay pit. Half a square mile the temple of Ishtar. 3 square miles and a half is Uruk's expanse. See the tablet box of cedar. Release its clasp of bronze. Lift the lid of its secret. Pick up the tablet of lapis lazuli and read out the travails of Gilgamesh, all that he went through. Surpassing all other kings, heroic in stature, brave scion of Uruk, wild bull on the rampage. Going at the foe, he was the vanguard. Going at the rear, one his comrades could trust. A mighty bank protecting his warriors. A violent flood wave smashing a stone wall. Wild bull of Lugabanda, Gilgamesh, the perfect in strength. Suckling of the august wild cow, the goddess Nin's son. Gilgamesh, the tall, magnificent, and terrible, who opened passes in the mountains, who dug wells on the slopes of the uplands, and crossed the ocean, the wide sea to the sunrise, who scoured the world ever searching for life, and reached through sheer force Utanapishti, the distant, who restored the cult centers destroyed by the deluge, and set in place for the people the rights of the cosmos. Who is there can rival his kingly standing? And say like Gilgamesh, "It is I am the king." Gilgamesh was his name from the day he was born, 2/3 of him God and 1/3 human. It was the lady of the gods drew the form of his figure, while his build was perfected by divine Nudimmud. A triple cubit was his foot, half a rod his leg. 6 cubits was his stride. Cubits the front part of his. His cheeks were bearded like those of. The hair of his head grew thickly as barley. When he grew tall, his beauty was consummate. By earthly standards, he was most handsome. In Uruk the sheepfold, he walks back and forth like a wild bull lording it, head held aloft. He has no equal when his weapons are brandished. His companions are kept on their feet by his contests. The young men of Uruk he harries without warrant. Gilgamesh lets no son go free to his father. By day and by night his tyranny grows harsher. Gilgamesh, the guide of the teeming people. It is he who is shepherd of Uruk the sheepfold. But Gilgamesh lets no daughter go free to her mother. The women voiced their troubles to the goddesses. They brought their complaint before them. Though powerful, preeminent, expert, and mighty, Gilgamesh lets no girl go free to her bridegroom. The warrior's daughter, the young man's bride, to their complaint the goddess paid heed. The gods of heaven, the lords of initiative, to the god Anu they spoke. A savage wild bull you have bred in Uruk the sheepfold. He has no equal when his weapons are brandished. His companions are kept on their feet by his contests. The young men of Uruk he harries without warrant. Gilgamesh lets no son go free to his father. By day and by night his tyranny grows harsher. Yet he is the shepherd of Uruk the sheepfold. Gilgamesh, the guide of the teeming people. Though he is their shepherd and their protector, powerful, preeminent, expert, and mighty, Gilgamesh lets no girl go free to her bridegroom. The warrior's daughter, the young man's bride, to their complaint the god Anu paid heed. This stanza gives Anu's reaction has been dropped in the late edition of the epic, but by good fortune it is preserved as a short extract from an older version of the text, which was written by a student scribe on an exercise tablet found in the city of Nippur. Quote, "Let them summon Aruru, the Great One. She it was created them, mankind so numerous. Let her create the equal of Gilgamesh, one mighty in strength, and let him vie with him, so Uruk may be rested." End quote. The text of Tablet 1 resumes. They summoned Aruru the Great One. "You, Aruru, created mankind. Now fashion what Anu has thought of. Let him be a match for the storm of his heart. Let them vie with each other, so Uruk may be rested." The goddess Aruru heard these words. What Anu had thought of, she fashioned within her. The goddess Aruru, she washed her hands, to a pinch of clay, drew it down in the wild. In the wild she created Enkidu, the hero, offspring of silence, knit strong by Ninurta. All his body is matted with hair. He bears long tresses like those of a woman. The hair of his head grows thickly as barley. He knows not a people, nor even a country. Coated in hair like the gods of the animals, with the gazelles he grazes on grasses, joining the throng with the game at the waterhole, his heart delighting with the beasts in the water. A hunter, a trapper man, did come upon him by the waterhole. One day, a second, and then a third, he came upon him by the waterhole. When the hunter saw him, his expression froze, but he with his herds, he went back to his lair. The hunter was troubled, subdued, and silent. His mood was despondent, his features gloomy. In his heart there was sorrow. His face resembled one come from afar. The hunter opened his mouth to speak, saying to his father, "My father, there was a man came by the water hole, mightiest in the land. Strength he possesses. His strength is as mighty as a rock from the sky. Over the hills he roams all day. Always with the herd he grazes on grasses. Always his tracks are found by the water hole. I am afraid, and I dare not approach him. He fills in the pits that I myself dig. He pulls up the snares that I lay. He sets free from my grasp all the beasts of the field. He stops me doing the work of the wild." His father opened his mouth to speak, saying to the hunter, "My son, in the city of Uruk, go, seek out Gilgamesh. In his presence, his strength is as mighty as a rock from the sky. Take the road, set your face toward Uruk. Do not rely on the strength of a man. Go, my son, and fetch Shamat the harlot. Her allure is a match for even the mighty. When the herd comes down to the water hole, she should strip off her raiment to reveal her charms. He will see her and will approach her. His herd will spurn him, though he grew up amongst it." Paying heed to the advice of his father, the hunter went off, set out on the journey. He took the road, set his face toward Uruk. Before Gilgamesh the king, he spoke these words. There was a man came by the water hole, mightiest in the land, strength he possesses. His strength is as mighty as a rock from the sky. Over the hills he roams all day, always with the herd he grazes on grasses. Always his tracks are found by the water hole. I am afraid, and I dare not approach him. He fills in the pits that I myself dig. He pulls up the snares that I lay. He sets free from my grasp all the beasts of the field. He stops me doing the work of the wild. Said Gilgamesh to the hunter, "Go, hunter, take with you Shamhat the harlot. When the herd comes down to the water hole, she should strip off her raiment to reveal her charms. He will see her and will approach her. His herd will spurn him, though he grew up amongst it." Off went the hunter, taking Shamhat the harlot. They set out on the road. They started the journey. On the third day they came to their destination. Hunter and harlot sat down there to wait. One day and a second they waited by the water hole. Then the herd came down to drink the water. The game arrived, their hearts delighting in water, and Enkidu also, born in the uplands. With the gazelles he grazed on grasses, joining the throng with the game at the water hole, his heart delighting with the beasts in the water. Then Shamhat saw him, the child of nature, the savage man from the midst of the wild. "This is he, Shamhat. Uncradle your bosom, bare your sex, let him take in your charms. Do not recoil, but take in his scent. He will see you and will approach you. Spread your clothing so he may lay on you. Do for the man the work of a woman. Let his passion caress and embrace you. His herd will spurn him, though he grew up amongst it." Shamhat unfastened the cloth of her loins. She bared her sex, and he took in her charms. She did not recoil. She took in his scent. She spread her clothing and he lay upon her. She did for the man the work of a woman. His passion caressed and embraced her. For 6 days and 7 nights, Enkidu was erect as he coupled with Shamhat. When with her delights he was fully sated, he turned his gaze to his herd. The gazelles saw Enkidu. They started to run. The beasts of the field shied away from his presence. Enkidu had defiled his body so pure. His legs stood still, though his herd was in motion. Enkidu was weakened, could not run as before, but now he had reason and wide understanding. He came back and sat at the feet of the harlot, watching the harlot, observing her features. Then to the harlot's words he listened intently, as Shamhat talked to him, to Enkidu. "You are handsome, Enkidu. You are just like a god. Why with the beast do you wander the wild? Come, I will take you to Uruk the sheepfold, to the sacred temple, home of Anu and Ishtar, where Gilgamesh is perfect in strength, like a wild bull, lording it over the menfolk." So she spoke to him, and her word found favor. He knew by instinct he should seek a friend. Said Enkidu to her, to the harlot, "Come, Shamhat, take me along to the sacred temple, holy home of Anu and Ishtar, where Gilgamesh is perfect in strength, like a wild bull lording it over the menfolk. I will challenge him, for my strength is mighty. I will vaunt myself in Uruk, saying, I am the mightiest. There I shall change the way things are ordered. One born in the wild is mighty, strength he possesses." Shamhat, "Let the people see your face. That exist I know indeed. Go, Enkidu, to Uruk the sheepfold, where young men are girt with waistbands. Every day in Uruk there is a festival. The drums there rap out the beat. And there are harlots, most comely of figure, graced with charm and full of delights. Even the aged they rouse from their beds. O Enkidu, as yet so ignorant of life, I will show you Gilgamesh, a man happy and carefree. Look at him, regard his features. He is fair in manhood, dignified in bearing, graced with charm in his whole person. He has a strength more mighty than yours. Unsleeping he is by day and by night. O Enkidu, cast aside your sinful thoughts. Gilgamesh it is whom divine Shamash loves. The gods Anu, Enlil, and Ea have broadened his wisdom. Before you even came from the uplands, Gilgamesh in Uruk was seeing you in dreams. Gilgamesh rose to relate a dream, saying to his mother, "O mother, this is the dream I had in the night. The stars of the heavens appeared above me, like a rock from the sky one fell down before me. I lifted it up, but it weighed too much for me. I tried to roll it, but I could not dislodge it. The land of Uruk was standing around it. The land was gathered about it. A crowd was milling about before it. The menfolk were thronging around it. Like a babe in arms, they were kissing its feet. Like a wife, I loved it, caressed and embraced it. I lifted it up, set it down at your feet. And you, O mother, you made it my equal." The mother of Gilgamesh was clever and wise, well versed in everything, she said to her son, while Kauninsan was clever and wise, well versed in everything, she said to Gilgamesh. The stars of heaven appeared above you. Like a rock from the sky one fell down before you. You lifted it up, but it weighed too much for you. You tried to roll it, but you could not dislodge it. You lifted it up, set it down at my feet, and I, Nin's son, I made it your equal. Like a wife you loved it, caressed and embraced it. A mighty comrade will come to you and be his friend's savior. Mightiest in the land, strength he possesses. His strength is as mighty as a rock from the sky. Like a wife you'll love him, caress and embrace him. He will be mighty and often will save you. Having had a second dream, he rose and entered before the goddess, his mother. Said Gilgamesh to her, to his mother, "Once more, O mother, have I had a dream. In a street of Uruk, the town square, an axe was lying with a crowd gathered round. The land of Uruk was standing around it. The country was gathered about it. A crowd was milling about before it. The menfolk were thronging around it. I lifted it up and set it down at your feet. Like a wife, I loved it, caressed and embraced it. And you, O mother, you made it my equal." The mother of Gilgamesh was clever and wise, well versed in everything she said to her son. Wild Cow Nin's son was clever and wise, well versed in everything she said to Gilgamesh. "My son, the axe you saw is a friend. Like a wife, you'll love him, caress and embrace him. And I, Nin's son, I shall make him your equal. A mighty comrade will come to you and be his friend's savior. Mightiest in the land, strength he possesses. His strength is as mighty as a rock from the sky." Said Gilgamesh to her, to his mother, "May it befall me, O mother, my counselor Enlil's command. Let me acquire a friend to counsel me. A friend to counsel me I will acquire." So did Gilgamesh see his dreams. After Shamhat had told Enkidu the dreams of Gilgamesh, the two of them together began making love. End of Tablet 1. Tablet 2. The Taming of Enkidu. The prostitute takes Enkidu to a shepherd's camp where he is instructed in the ways of men and becomes the shepherd's watchman. A passing stranger tells him how in Uruk, Gilgamesh exercises Droit de seigneur at wedding ceremonies. Enkidu, shocked by this practice, enters Uruk and interrupts the proceedings. Gilgamesh and Enkidu fight until Enkidu accepts Gilgamesh's supremacy, whereupon the pair become firm friends. In search of fame and glory, Gilgamesh proposes an expedition to the Forest of Cedar, ignoring Enkidu's warning of the dangers. They kit themselves out with weapons. Gilgamesh announces his plans to the assembly of Uruk. The elders try to dissuade him. Enkidu was sitting before her. A lacuna follows the opening line of Tablet 2, and when the text resumes, the lines are still not fully recovered. The big old Babylonian Pennsylvania tablet, P, supplies a better preserved account, though one that partly overlaps with Tablet 1. While the two of them together were making love, he forgot the wild where he was born. For 7 days and 7 nights, Enkidu was erect and coupled with Shamhat. The harlot opened her mouth, saying to Enkidu, "As I look at you, Enkidu, you are like a god. Why with the beast do you wander the wild? Come, I will lead you to Uruk, the town square, to the sacred temple, the home of Anu. Enkidu, arise, let me take you to the temple Inanna, the home of Anu, where men are engaged in labors of skill, you too, like a man, will find a place for yourself. Her words he heard, her speech found favor. The counsel of a woman struck home in his heart. She stripped and clothed him in part of her garment, the other part she put on herself. The text of Tablet 2 resumes. By the hand she took him, like a god she led him, to the shepherd's camp, the site of the sheep pen. The band of shepherds was gathered around him, talking about him among themselves. This fellow, how like in build he is to Gilgamesh, tall in stature, proud as a battlement. For sure it's Enkidu, born in the uplands. His strength is as mighty as a rock from the sky. Bread they set before him, ale they set before him. Enkidu ate not the bread, but looked askance. Here, Tablet 2 becomes fragmentary again, and the episode is best taken from the Old Babylonian Pennsylvania tablet. How to eat bread Enkidu knew not, how to drink ale he had never been shown. The harlot opened her mouth, saying to Enkidu, Eat the bread, Enkidu, essential to life. Drink the ale, the lot of the land. Enkidu ate the bread until he was sated. He drank the ale, a full 7 goblets. His mood became free. He started to sing. His heart grew merry. His face lit up. The barber groomed his body so hairy. Anointed with oil, he turned into a man. He put on a garment, became like a warrior. He took up his weapon to do battle with lions. The text of Tablet 2 resumes again. When at night the shepherds lay sleeping, he struck down wolves, he chased off lions. Sleeping lay the senior shepherds, the shepherd boy Enkidu, a man wide awake. A certain fellow had been invited to a wedding. To Uruk the sheepfold he was going for the banquet. Here another lacuna intervenes in Tablet 2, which the Old Babylonian tablet again helps to fill. Enkidu was having his pleasure with Shamash. He lifted his eyes, caught sight of the man, and thus he spoke to the harlot. Shamash, bring the man over. Why he came here, let me learn his reason. The harlot hailed the man, went up to him, spoke to him. Where do you hurry to, fellow? What is your journey so toilsome? The fellow opened his mouth, saying to Enkidu, I was invited to a wedding banquet. It is the lot of the people to contract a marriage. I shall load the ceremonial table with tempting foods for the wedding feast. For the king of Uruk, the town square, the veil will be parted for the one who picks first. For Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, the town square, the veil will be parted for the one who picks first. He will couple with the wife-to-be, he first of all, the bridegroom after. By divine consent it is so ordained. When his navel cord was cut, for him she was destined. At the fellow's words, his face paled in anger. Off goes Enkidu with Shamash following. He entered the city of Uruk, the town square, and a crowd gathered around. He came to a halt in the street of Uruk, the town square. All gathered about. The people discussed him. In build he is the image of Gilgamesh, but shorter in stature and bigger of bone. For sure it's the one who was born in the uplands. Animal's milk is what he was suckled on. In Uruk they held a regular festival of sacrifice. Young men made merry, set up a champion. For the fellow whose features were fair, for Gilgamesh, like a god, was set up a rival. For the goddess of wedding the bed was laid out. Gilgamesh met with the maiden by night. Forward came Enkidu. He stood in the street, blocking the path of Gilgamesh. The text of Tablet 2 becomes legible once more. The land of Uruk was standing around him. The land was gathered about him. A crowd was milling about before him. The menfolk were thronging around him. Like a babe in arms, they were kissing his feet, all ready the fellow. For the goddess of weddings was ready the bed. For Gilgamesh, like a god, was set up a substitute. Enkidu, with his foot, blocked the door of the wedding house, not allowing Gilgamesh to enter. They seized each other at the door of the wedding house. In the street they joined combat, in the square of the land. The door jambs shook, the wall did shudder. In the street Gilgamesh and Enkidu joined combat, in the square of the land. The door jambs shook, the wall did shudder. Another lacuna intervenes, again partly to be filled by the old Babylonian Pennsylvania tablet. Gilgamesh knelt, one foot on the ground. His anger subsided. He broke off from the fight. After he broke off from the fight, said Enkidu to him, to Gilgamesh, "As one unique your mother bore you, the wild cow of the fold, the goddess and son. High over warriors you are exalted. To be king of the people Enlil made it your destiny. At this point, the old Babylonian Pennsylvania tablet ends. Its sequel, the Yale tablet, is less well preserved. In the first intelligible episode, Enkidu is speaking to Gilgamesh. Why do you desire to do this thing? Anything. Do you want so much? Let me. A feat that never was done in the land. They kissed each other and formed a friendship. After another lacuna, Tablet 2 resumes with an episode in which Gilgamesh introduces Enkidu to his mother. The mightiest in the land, strength he possesses. His strength is as mighty as a rock from the sky. He is tall in stature, proud as a battlement. The mother of Gilgamesh opened her mouth to speak, saying to her son, while Cow Ninsun opened her mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, "My son, in his gate, bitterly you hold in his gate. Bitterly he, Enkidu, possesses no kith or kin. Shaggy hair hanging loose, he was born in the wild and has no brother." Standing there, Enkidu heard what she said, and thinking it over, he sat down weeping. His eyes brimmed with tears. His arms fell limp. His strength ebbed away. They took hold of each other and they linked their hands like. Gilgamesh, to Enkidu, he spoke a word, saying, "Why, my friend, did your eyes brim with tears? Your arms fall limp, your strength ebb away?" Said Enkidu to him, to Gilgamesh, "My friend, my heart is aggrieved. Though sobbing, my legs do tremble. Terror has entered my heart." The old Babylonian Yale tablet fills the gap in the standard version. Gilgamesh opened his mouth, saying to Enkidu, "Ferocious Humbaba, Let us slay him, so his power is no more. In the Forest of Cedar, where Humbaba dwells, let us frighten him in his lair. Enkidu opened his mouth, saying to Gilgamesh, I knew him, my friend, in the uplands, when I roamed here and there with the herd. For 60 leagues the forest is a wilderness. Who is there would venture inside it? Humbaba, his voice is the deluge, his speech is fire, and his breath is death. Why do you desire to do this thing? An unwinnable battle is Humbaba's ambush. Gilgamesh opened his mouth, saying to Enkidu, I will climb, my friend, the forest slopes. The text of Tablet 2 resumes. Enkidu opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, My friend, how can we go to the home of Humbaba? So to keep safe the cedars, Enlil made it his lot to terrify men. That is a journey which must not be made. That is a man who must not be looked on. He who guards the forest of cedar, his reach is wide. Humbaba, his voice is the deluge. His speech is fire, his breath is death. He hears the forest murmur at 60 leagues distance. Who is there would venture into his forest? Adad ranks first, and Humbaba second. Who is there would oppose him among the Igigi? So to keep safe the cedars, Enlil made it his lot to terrify men. If you penetrate his forest, you are seized by the tremors. Gilgamesh opened his mouth to speak, saying to Enkidu, Why, my friend, do you speak like a weakling? With your spineless words you make me despondent. As for man, his days are numbered. Whatever he may do, it is but wind. Exist not for me. You were born and grew up in the wild. Even lions were afraid of you. You experienced all. Grown men fled away from your presence. Your heart is tried and tested in combat. Come, my friend, let us heed to the forge. A short lacuna follows. It can be filled from the old Babylonian Yale tablet. Let them cast us hatchets in our presence. They took each other by the hand and heeded to the forge, where the smiths were sitting in consultation. Great hatchets they cast, and axes weighing 3 talents apiece. Great daggers they cast, 2 talents apiece were the blades. 1/2 of a talent the crests of their handles, 1/2 a talent apiece the daggers' gold mountings. Gilgamesh and Enkidu bore 10 talents each. He bolted the 7-fold gates of Uruk. He convened the assembly, the crowd gathered round. In the street of Uruk, the town square, Gilgamesh seated himself on his throne. In the street of Uruk, the town square, the crowd was sitting before him. Thus Gilgamesh spoke to the elders of Uruk, the town square. Hear me, O elders of Uruk, the town square. I would tread the path to ferocious Humbaba. I would see the god of whom men talk, whose name the lands do constantly repeat. I will conquer him in the forest of cedar. Let the land learn Uruk's offshoot is mighty. Let me start out. I will cut down the cedar. I will establish forever a name eternal. Then Gilgamesh spoke to the young men of Uruk the sheepfold. Hear me, O young men of Uruk the sheepfold. O young men of Uruk who understand combat. Bold as I am, I shall tread the distant path to the home of Humbaba. I shall face a battle I know not. I shall ride a road I know not. Give me your blessings as I go on my journey, so I may see again your faces in safety, and return glad at heart through Uruk's gate. On my return, I will celebrate the new year twice over. I will celebrate the festival twice in the year. Let the festival take place, the merriment begin. Let the drums resound before the wild cow Ninsun. Enkidu offered counsel to the elders and the young men of Uruk who understood combat. Tell him not to go to the Forest of Cedar. That is a journey which must not be made. That is a man who must not be looked on. He who guards the Forest of Cedar, his reach is wide. This Humbaba, his voice is the deluge. His speech is fire. His breath is death. He hears the forest murmur at 60 leagues distance. Who is there would venture into his forest? Adad ranks first and Humbaba second. Who is there would oppose him among the Igigi? So to keep safe the cedars, Enlil made it his lot to terrify men. If you penetrate his forest, you are seized by the tremors. The senior advisors rose. Good counsel they offered Gilgamesh. You are young, Gilgamesh, borne along by emotion. All that you talk of you don't understand. This Humbaba, his voice is the deluge. His speech is fire, his breath is death. He hears the forest murmur at 60 leagues distance. Who is there would venture into his forest? Adad ranks first and Humbaba second. Who is there would oppose him among the Igigi? So to keep safe the cedars, Enlil made it his lot to terrify men. Gilgamesh heard the words of the senior advisors. He looked with a laugh at Enkidu. Now, my friend, how frightened I am. In fear of him shall I change my mind? The rest of Tablet 2, perhaps 20 lines containing Gilgamesh reply to his counselor, is lost. End of Tablet 2. Tablet 3. Preparations for the expedition to the Forest of Cedar. The elders give Gilgamesh and Enkidu advice for their journey. The two heroes visit the goddess Ninsun, who enlists the help of the sun god Shamash and the aid of his wife Aya. Ninsun adopts the orphan Enkidu. Gilgamesh gives instructions for the governing of Uruk in his absence. The heroes depart. The elders of Uruk the sheepfold spoke to Gilgamesh. To Uruk's quay come back in safety. Do not rely, O Gilgamesh, on your strength alone. Look long and hard. Land a blow you can count on. Who goes in front saves his companion. Who knows the road protects his friend. Let Enkidu go before you. He knows the journey to the Forest of Cedar. He is tested in battle and tried in combat. He shall guard his friend and keep safe his companion. Enkidu shall bring him safe home to his wives. To Enkidu. In our assembly we place the king in your care. You bring him back and replace him in ours. Gilgamesh opened his mouth to speak, saying to Enkidu, Come, my friend, let us go to the palace sublime, into the presence of the great queen Ninsun. Ninsun is clever and wise, well versed in everything. She will set our feet in steps of good counsel. Taking each other hand in hand, Gilgamesh and Enkidu went to the palace sublime, into the presence of the great queen Ninsun. Gilgamesh rose and entered before her. Said Gilgamesh to her, to Ninsun, I shall tread, O Ninsun, bold as I am, this distant path to the home of Humbaba. I shall face a battle I know not. I shall ride a road I know not. I beseech you, give me your blessing for my journey. Let me see your face again in safety, and return glad at heart through Uruk's gate. On my return I will celebrate New Year twice over. I will celebrate the festival twice in the year. Let the festival take place, the merriment begin. Let the drums resound in your presence. While Cow Ninsun listened long and with sadness to the words of Gilgamesh, her son, and Enkidu. Into the bathhouse she went 7 times. She bathed herself in water of tamarisk and soapwort. She donned a fine dress to adorn her body. She chose a jewel to adorn her breast. Having put on her cap, she donned her tiara. The harlots, the ground. She climbed the staircase and went up on the roof. On the roof she set up a censer to Shamash. Scattering incense, she lifted her arms in appeal to the sun god. Why did you afflict my son Gilgamesh with so restless a spirit? For now you have touched him, and he will tread the distant path to the home of Humbaba. He will face a battle he knows not. He will ride a road he knows not. During the days of his journey there and back, until he reaches the Forest of Cedar, until he slays ferocious Humbaba, and annihilates from the land of evil thing you abhor. Each day, when you travel the circuit of the earth, may Aya the bride unfearing remind you. Entrust him to the care of the watches of the night. At eventide, you opened, O Shamash, the gates for the herd to go out. For you came forth for the land. The uplands took shape, the heavens grew bright. The beasts of the wild, you ruddy glow. At the coming forth of your light it gathered the crowd. The divine Annunaki await your brilliance. May Aya the bride, unfearing, remind you, and trust him to the care of the watches of the night. Also, while Gilgamesh travels to the Forest of Cedar, let the days be long, let the nights be short. Let his loins be girt, let his stride be sure. Let him pitch a nightfall a camp for the night. Let nighttime. May Aya the bride unfearing remind you, the day Gilgamesh and Enkidu encounter Humbaba. O Shamash, rouse against Humbaba the mighty gale winds, south wind, north wind, east wind, and west wind. Blast, counterblast, typhoon, hurricane, and tempest, devil wind, frost wind, gale, and tornado. Let rise 13 winds and Humbaba's face darken. Let the weapons of Gilgamesh then reach Humbaba. After your very own fires are kindled, at that time, O Shamash, turn your face to the supplicant. Your fleet-footed mules shall bear you onwards. A restful seat, a bed for the night shall be what awaits you. The gods, your brothers, shall bring food to delight you. Aya the bride shall wipe your face dry with the fringe of her garment. Again, Wild Cow Ninsun made her request before Shamash. O Shamash, will not Gilgamesh, the gods, will he not share the heavens with you? Will he not share with the moon a scepter and crown? Will he not grow wise with Ea of the ocean below? Will he not rule with Inanna, the black-headed people? Will he not dwell with Ningishzida in the land of no return? Let me make him, O Shamash, Lesti, in the Forest of Cedar. After Wild Cow Ninsun had charged Shamash thus, Wild Cow Ninsun was clever and wise, well-versed in everything, the mother of Gilgamesh. She smothered the censer and came down from the roof. She summoned Enkidu and declared her will. O mighty Enkidu, you are not sprung from my womb, but henceforth your brood will belong with the votaries of Gilgamesh, the priestesses, the heralds of the women of the temple. She puts the symbols on Enkidu's neck. The priestess took in the foundling, and the divine daughters brought up the foster child, Enkidu, whom I love, I take for my son. Enkidu in brotherhood, Gilgamesh shall favor him. Also, while you travel together to the Forest of Cedar, let the days be long, let the nights be short, let your loins be girt, let your stride be sure. At nightfall, pitch a camp for the night, let protect. After another lacuna, there follows an episode in which Gilgamesh and Enkidu apparently perform rituals in aid of a safe journey, but it remains badly damaged. Gilgamesh, his to the gate of cedar, Enkidu in the chapel, and Gilgamesh in the chapel of juniper, incense. Members of the were present. By the command of Shamash, you will attain your desire. In the gate of Marduk, on the breast of the water, the back, in the gate of cedar knot, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, at 20 leagues, you should break bread. After a long lacuna, Gilgamesh gives instructions for the running of the city in his absence. During the days of our journey there and back, until we reach the Forest of Cedar, until we slay ferocious Humbaba and annihilate from the land the evil things Shamash abhors, may you acquire no. The officers must not assemble young men in the street, judge the lawsuit of the weak, seek out, while we attain our desire like babes in arms, and plant our weapons in Humbaba's gate. The officers stood there wishing him well. The young men of Uruk ran behind in a mob. The officers kissed his feet. To Uruk's quay come back in safety. Do not rely, O Gilgamesh, on your strength alone. Look long and hard. Land a blow you can count on. Who goes in front will save his comrade. Who knows the road shall guard his friend. Let Enkidu go before you. He knows the journey to the Forest of Cedar. He is tested in battle and tried in combat. Through the mountain passes he often has journeyed. He shall guard his friend and keep safe his companion. Enkidu shall bring him safe home to his wives. To Enkidu. In our assembly we place the king in your care. You bring him back and replace him in ours. Enkidu opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, my friend, turn back. Do not pursue this journey. The rest of Tablet 3, perhaps 10 lines, is missing. The departure of the heroes is described in the old Babylonian Yale tablet, though the text becomes increasingly fragmentary. Enkidu opened his mouth, saying to Gilgamesh, where you set your mind, begin the journey. Let your heart have no fear. Keep your eyes on me. In the forest, I knew his lair, and the ways, too, that Humbaba wanders. Speak to the crowd and send them home. They should not go with me. To you, the crowd with happy heart, they heard what he had said. The young man made a fervent prayer. Go, Gilgamesh, may your God go before you. May Shamash let you attain your goal. Gilgamesh and Enkidu went forth. End of Tablet 3. Let's head over to the next video where we continue with Tablet 4 as the warriors enter the Forest of Cedar.